Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we don't just skim the surface. We really get in there, roll up our sleeves, look at the sources, and give you that shortcut to being really well informed.
That's the goal. We try to distill the core ideas from the material you bring us.
Ah.
And today, this is a good one, we're diving into session 22 of the early sessions, book 1 of the Seth material.
Yeah, and let's get specific, because context is everything here. This session, it was recorded Tuesday, February 4, 1964, and the time was logged at exactly 6:50 p.m. Amazing detail.
It really is. And we're just really happy to share this exploration. This deep dive is going out free of charge on all the major platforms. It's purely for educational purposes.
Absolutely. The ideas in here about consciousness, communication, they're just too important not to share,
And this session 22, it kicks off differently. It was totally unscheduled.
Right. So Jane and Joseph, or Ruburt and Joseph, as they're known in this context, they'd just gotten some really good news about her first book from the publisher, Ace Books.
Yeah, so the energy's high, they're excited, talking about it, and Jane just sort of thinks aloud, maybe we could have a quick session.
And boom, Seth is basically right there. He jumps in, and the tone is immediately, well, it's classic Seth, isn't it? Half teasing, half affectionate.
Totally. His first line is, "Are you gluttons for punishment?"
Huh. You just gotta love that. It tells you straight away this isn't some stiff, formal thing. It's familiar.
And then he adds, kind of sensing their buzzy energy, "Well, the chickadees must be restless tonight." Chickadees, that's his playful term for Jane and Joseph.
Sets the scene perfectly. A spontaneous, high-energy, slightly sarcastic, but ultimately warm interaction.
Exactly. So let's dig into that spontaneity first, because it really shapes the whole feel of the session.
Okay, so Jane had the thought, and then she starts getting these little nudges, right? A quick message in the kitchen.
Then another one in Joseph's studio. It's like she's being gently, or maybe not so gently, pushed towards going into trance.
It seems like their combined enthusiasm was just like a beacon.
It does. But Seth, he has his ways, his preferences. He actually starts by saying he's not necessarily in favor of sessions outside a regular schedule.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Well, he says it's for reasons having to do with your natures rather than mine.
Okay, so it's about them. Like maybe the suddenness, the emotional high could affect Jane's trance or Joseph's note-taking?
That seems to be the implication.
Yeah?
They're the physical instruments here, and maybe routine helps keep that instrument finely tuned. High emotion could, introduce static.
Makes sense. But then he pivots pretty quickly, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He immediately follows up with, "However, your unbounded enthusiasm this evening made me hesitate to disappoint you," and adds that lovely line. It's so nice to be wanted. I don't mean to be sarcastic. It really is.
Oh, so he appreciates the genuine pull, the welcome.
Definitely. And he even comments on his own presence, saying he doesn't usually just hang around their apartment unless invited. But tonight, he says, they were yelling my name from the rooftops, so to speak.
So even for an entity like Seth, there needs to be that focused invitation from, our side.
It seems so. Which leads us right into the idea that kind of sparked this whole thing, the lively arts.
Right. That was the first little message Jane got. I enjoy the lively arts.
And Joseph, hearing this amidst all the book excitement, he just laughs. He thinks Seth is making a joke about Jane's dramatic way of relaying the messages she was getting.
Hey, yeah, like she was putting on a little show for him.
Exactly. A totally understandable reaction. But Seth clarifies pretty fast. He enjoyed the enthusiasm, sure, but the lively arts he meant was specifically their method of communication.
Yes, speaking. The back-and-forth conversation they have during the sessions.
Precisely. The conversational style, even if it often ends up being mostly him talking.
And this gets into a really core idea in the early material, doesn't it? Why he prefers this speaking method over, say, automatic writing.
Oh, he's very clear on that. He feels automatic writing misses something crucial. It lacks, in his words, the spontaneity involved in emotional content.
Spontaneity. Emotion. So automatic writing feels too filtered, too cold.
Yeah, or it can become too one-sided, maybe too much like an institution, as he puts it. It doesn't have that immediate vital spark.
And he ties it to his own personality, too, which I love.
He does. He says, the speaking method suits me temperamentally, and believe you me, I can be temperamental.
Huh. So he needs a dynamic channel. One that can handle his energy, his, temperament.
It seems that way. He needs a format that lets his personality shine through, not just dry information.
And it's not just about him talking, is it? He actually values their input.
Yes, very much so. He says, I still like a give-and-take mood and the interplay of personalities that you get in this manner.
So when Joseph manages to get a question in or Jane makes a comment through her own thoughts, that actually helps the process.
Definitely. He explicitly says their questions and comments often remind him of other things I would like to say. It makes it a collaboration, a living thing.
Which is why he calls it the liveliest of all arts, at least in the social sense.
Right. He's careful to qualify that, not necessarily comparing it to painting or music as high art forms, but for social interaction, for this kind of connection, conversation is king. It's vital.
Okay, so the method is established. Spontaneous conversation is best. Now let's look at the people involved. This triad, Seth, Joseph, Jen or Bridget, there's a real dynamic there.
Oh, absolutely. It's full of affection, protection, and a whole lot of teasing, especially towards Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph asks about that, doesn't he? Why Seth seems to address him more often?
And Seth's answer is practical. On one level, he says, it is because your mouth is free to answer. Jane's mouth is obviously busy speaking Seth's words.
Okay, fair enough. But is Joseph just the note-taker? Seth seems to imply more. He insists the two of you are needed?
Right, and then he adds that crucial bit, because we three have much in common, more in fact than you know thus far.
Much in common. That sounds like past lives, shared history, something deeper than just needing a scribe and a speaker.
It really points towards an energetic necessity. Joseph isn't just recording, he's grounding the experience, maybe providing a specific kind of supportive energy. Jane is the verbal channel, Joseph is the anchor, the observer consciousness holding the space.
They're a team, a necessary pairing for this to work the way it does.
Exactly. Which makes his stance on predictions really interesting, especially given Jane's excitement about the book.
Yeah, she naturally wanted to know, is it going to be a success? And Seth just flat out refused to give specifics.
And his reasoning is pretty profound, psychologically speaking. He says, I cannot afford to give you any predictions at this time for fear that you would unconsciously distort them. And then it would seem that I was to blame.
So it's not just that they might change their actions, it's that knowing the prediction would change how they perceive everything related to it.
Precisely. It's about the power of expectation. If he tells them at the bestseller, suddenly every little sign, every review, every conversation gets filtered through that expectation. They might inadvertently manifest roadblocks or misinterpret events because they're trying too hard or not hard enough based on the prediction.
It contaminates the natural unfolding of things. He'd be interfering just by stating an outcome.
Yeah. It's a kind of psychic Heisenberg principle almost. Observing it, predicting it, changes it.
And this connects back to what he said about communication methods. He distrusts the written word, too, right?
He does. He admits, I have never completely trusted the written word half as much as I trust the spoken word. And on your plane, it is difficult to trust either.
Difficult to trust either. That's quite a statement about physical reality.
And again, there's an aesthetic reason, too. He finds seeing his ideas turned into plain black and white words on a page of paper seems dull and uninteresting.
Like the life drains out of it when it's fixed in print.
Something like that. The vitality gets lost, which actually leads perfectly into Joseph's next question.
Ah, the dreams, right? Joseph mentions Jane's been having these confusing dreams full of instructions and messages, and he asks Seth, basically, was that you trying to talk to her in her sleep?
And Seth's denial is just priceless. So affectionate, so perfectly delivered according to the notes. He says, I was not trying to reach Ruburt in her sleep. Even I am not so bold as that. A woman's slumber is, after all, a private and sacred thing.
Huh. You can just hear the tone, can't you? Slightly mocking, slightly prim, totally humorous.
Exactly. And Seth immediately points that out himself. He uses it as proof of why the spoken word is better. He asks Joseph to notice how prim that last sentence would sound if it were merely written down without the lively, slightly sardonic inflection which I managed to give to Rupert's voice.
Good point. The tone carries so much meaning that print just loses. The humor, the affection, it's all in the delivery.
But he does explain where the dream stuff was coming from.
Not Seth, then.
Nope. It was, and this is key, Rupert's own entity. The information was flooding in because, as Seth puts it, her inner senses were indeed wide open. She forgot to close them before she went to bed.
Whoa, okay. Let's break that down. Jane is the everyday person. Ruburt is the trans personality, the part of herself that channels Seth. But the entity. That's the whole big self, right? Across all
the understanding, yes. The totality of her consciousness. So, essentially, Jane or Ruburt left the psychic back door open, And instead of Seth coming through the front door by invitation, a whole library of information from her own larger self started pouring in, kind of unfiltered.
Leading to confusion and mixed messages in her dreams, like trying to drink from a fire hose when you just wanted a sip of water.
Good analogy. It highlights the need for, let's call it spiritual hygiene, managing your own inner senses.
Okay, this idea of inner senses being open or closed leads us right into the more technical part. The camouflage patterns. This sounds important.
Oh, it's fundamental. This is where Seth explains how the communication actually works, how his non-physical data becomes perceivable words. We really need to grasp this.
Right. So he says the data he sends is not actually sound on my part. It's not like he's making English words in some other dimension.
Exactly. It's more like pure energy, pure thought, pure information. Raw data existing outside our sensory framework.
So how does that raw data turn into sentences like, "Are you gluttons for punishment?" How does the translation happen?
That's Rubert's specific talent, her function in this setup. Because Jean Ruburt deals in words, she's a writer, her mind works that way, she can automatically, instantaneously translate that inner nonverbal data stream
Into words.
into what Seth calls coherent, valid, and faithful camouflage patterns.
Camouflage. That word is so loaded. So the words we hear, the sentences Joseph writes down, they're just a disguise. A functional costume for the real underlying energy.
That's the concept. The physical plane, our senses, can't perceive the raw data directly. So it needs to be dressed up in a pattern we can perceive, in this case, sound and language.
And for Ruburt, this happens instantly.
Apparently so, through the inner workings of the mind, the inner senses, and the brain. But, and this is crucial, the type of camouflage depends on the receiver's natural inclination. Ruburt is geared for audio-verbal patterns.
Which Seth says is the easiest route for this kind of communication.
Right. Now compare that to Joseph. Seth says Joseph is more sensitive to inner visual data.
So if Joseph were the main channel, the information might come through as images, pictures.
Exactly. Which, as Seth points out, would then frequently need interpretation to be turned into words. It adds another layer of translation, another potential spot for distortion.
Imagine trying to dictate a philosophical argument that you're receiving as a stream of complex images. That sounds incredibly difficult.
Yeah, much harder than Rubert's seemingly direct audio feed. Seth even sympathizes with Joseph's handwork, just taking the notes.
So recognizing Joseph's visual strength, Seth encourages him to develop that, but also maybe other inner senses too.
Yes. Joseph actually shares an exercise he'd tried earlier that day. He was looking at things in the room, like a vase, and trying to use his mind's eye to travel around these objects so that I could picture within the far side of them.
So not just imagining it, but trying to perceive the unseen parts using an inner sense.
That's the goal, yeah. Pushing beyond the limits of physical sight.
Did he do anything else?
Yeah, he expanded it. He visualized walking across the local Walnut Street Bridge. But again, not just seeing it mentally. He tried to feel the wooden planks, sense the lights, even reach out and envelop the feeling of the house and trees on each side, to sense them as if by touch.
Wow. That's like activating multiple inner senses at once. Inner sight, inner touch, inner feeling.
Intense, right. And Seth's reaction. Totally validating.
What did he say?
He confirmed. Your experience yesterday, Joseph, was an exercise of the inner senses, and one that you should try for again and again.
So practice. Conscious, deliberate practice is key to developing these abilities. It's not just passive.
Seems so. And Seth adds a reality check, too. He notes that Ruburt is still far from proficiency in inner vision, just like Joseph is far from easily translating data into audio. They each have their strength and areas for development.
So the challenge for anyone trying this is twofold. Receive the data clearly and translate it accurately into whatever camouflage pattern works best for you, be it words, images, feelings.
Exactly. And the consistency of Rubert's translation into words is a big part of what makes this material so unique.
Okay. Now, from inner senses, the conversation takes this really unexpected turn into sculpture.
Yeah, it flows naturally from Joseph thinking about his own creative outlets. He's visually oriented, he's an artist, so he asks Seth about trying wood carving.
Right. He asks if he could carve a likeness of Seth, guided by his inner senses.
And Seth is encouraging, playful about it. It would if you look for it. It might be fun, certainly, to try. Standard supportive stuff. But then Seth just drops this major critique of sculpture itself. And it seems to completely flip conventional thinking about art.
What does he say?
He says he feels sculpture is a more imprisoning form than painting, music, or poetry.
More impressive. Wait. Usually we think of sculpture as powerful because it's so physical, right? You can walk around it, touch it, see its depth and weight.
Right.
It engages multiple outer senses.
That's the standard view,
Yeah.
absolutely. More senses engaged equals more impact, more reality.
So why does Seth see the opposite? Why imprisoning?
It goes right back to the camouflage patterns.
Mm-hmm.
A painting is flat. Music is vibration, gone in an instant. Poetry works through the suggestion, rhythm. They're less physically concrete than a solid block of carved wood or stone.
Okay.
So Seth argues the outer senses react to the camouflage. The more senses the physical form appeals to sight, touch, depth perception, the more bound the artwork is to you by so many ties.
Ties to the physical senses, the physical reality pattern.
Exactly. And because it's so tightly bound to the physical camouflage, the original vitality, the raw energy, the non-physical idea behind the art gets locked inside it. It's imprisoned by the very completeness of its physical form.
Whoa. Okay, so the statue imprisons vitality more than a painting or musical composition or poem. The better it mimics physical reality for our outer senses, the less the inner reality, the energy, can flow through.
That's the radical idea he's presenting. It's a fundamental critique, not just of art, but of how we perceive reality through physical forms. Our own bodies perhaps being the ultimate sculpture that limits the full expression of our entity's vitality.
So the best art in this view might be the art that's more abstract, more suggestive, the kind that forces you to use your inner senses to grasp the vitality behind the imperfect camouflage.
That seems to be the implication. It completely flips aesthetics on its head. We usually praise perfect execution of form, but maybe we should value the form that lets the most energy leak through.
Mind blown. And Seth apparently meant to bring this up earlier.
Yeah, he mentions that, maybe picking up on Joseph's thoughts about his own art. And then right after delivering that bombshell, he quickly shifts gears, says he doesn't want to wear out my welcome, and brings the session back to a lighter, more personal note.
Classic timing. Okay, so the end of the session, it gets more relaxed, right?
Yeah.
Family stuff.
Yeah, it becomes more conversational. He touches on the sheer amount of information involved. If he were to try and give a full rundown on, say, all their relatives just in this one lifetime.
He kind of emphasizes the scale of it all.
He says, imagine trying to explain your own family tree and history to someone else just in this lifetime. He points out there is, after all, literally a stupendous amount of information, and even though he could perceive it, translating it all to the spoken word is just impossible.
It puts the snippets we do get into perspective. We're getting highly filtered highlights from an ocean of data.
Exactly. But he does offer one very specific, very touching detail. He confirms he's met Jane's deceased grandfather.
Oh, wow. What did he say?
He relayed that the grandfather called Jane his good kiddo. And the notes clarify that specific phrase was basically the highest compliment that particular man ever gave.
That's incredible validation. Small detail, huge impact, delivered with warmth.
Definitely. And then, almost immediately, he switches back to teasing Joseph.
Of course. Joseph must have been wondering again if Seth played favorites.
Seems like it. Seth says, I'm equally fond of you both, but then explains the teasing. It is just so much fun to taunt you. I always did, and you always taunted me back.
Always did. So this playful dynamic goes way back, lifetimes back.
That's the clear implication. This isn't new. It's a continuation of a very old, very affectionate relationship pattern.
And he gives a specific example, right, about Jane being protective.
Yeah, he brings up a time Joseph was sick, and apparently Jane, as Ruburt, maybe reflecting her deeper personality, was super anxious, guarding him like a mother hen, you egghead.
Huh. Mother hen and egghead in the same breath. That perfectly captures their dynamic, doesn't it? Jane's nurturing, maybe slightly anxious side, and Joseph's intellectual focus.
Totally. And Seth points out that some things about a personality never change. These core traits persist.
So before he wraps up, there's some practical stuff about recording.
Yes, he pushes them again. Either borrow a recorder or dispense with notes. He clearly wants more efficient method, less strain on Joseph.
Makes sense. And a party?
He promises one.
Huh.
Someday we'll have a party, and we will have a good old informal time of it, though not, of course, like Denmark.
Like Denmark. Another one of those cryptic inside jokes hinting at shared past experiences.
Something they'll get down to brass tacks on later, he says.
And then he signs off.
Pretty much. A final little jab at Joseph's hardworking fingers. They're not falling off, but also making it clear that these unscheduled sessions are the exception. Too much of a good thing,
He gets the last laugh, keeping it light right to the very end.
And Jane's comment after coming out of trance is interesting, too. She says, when Seth gets warm and emotional, It always throws me. I never know quite what to do.
So those moments of direct personal connection were actually the most intense or unsettling for her conscious mind to process.
It seems so. The philosophical stuff, maybe easier. The direct emotion, harder to handle.
Okay. Wow, what a session. Let's try and pull together the main threads here. What are the big takeaways from this deep dive into session 22?
Well, first, I'd say the absolute value Seth places on spontaneous conversation as the ideal communication method, the liveliest art. It's about personality, emotion, that give and take, not just dry data transfer like he felt automatic writing could become.
Right. Second, the whole concept of camouflage patterns, understanding that what we perceive, words, sights, sounds, are just translations, functional disguises for raw, underlying energy or data processed through our inner senses. Reality is a translation.
hmm And third, that really provocative idea about sculpture and physical form in general, the notion that the more a form appeals to our outer senses, the more it might actually imprison the underlying vitality or energy. That's a huge reversal of how we usually think.
It really is. Which leaves us with, I think, a pretty big question to chew on, based on that last point.
Go for it.
If physical forms, like sculpture, can imprison vitality by being too tied to our outer senses, what vitality, what energy, what aspects of consciousness are we missing or imprisoning in our everyday lives by relying so heavily, almost exclusively, on our five physical senses? What gets locked away because we demand everything fit into that physical camouflage pattern?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Pushing beyond the camouflage. If these ideas intrigue you, if you want to explore inner senses, consciousness, the nature of reality further, you really have to go to the source.
Absolutely. We highly encourage you to read the Seth material for yourself. This session is from the early sessions, book 1, and the publisher is the New Awareness Network.
Please do check out the books, and you can visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore for more resources. That's at https.sethcenter.com/Ruli sessions.
It's been fascinating unpacking this one. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure. We'll catch you on the next one.